The economic situation in Poland in 1989 was really dramatic. We had hyperinflation. Production was falling. There was a chaos in the economy. But Poland became free. And what was impossible a year ago became possible because of this political breakthrough. And since I was very much interested in reforms in other countries without hoping that Poland would be free in my life, so by accident, I was more or less prepared with a group of people with whom I was working. And after assuming this job of Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, you have first set what is the model of the economy we wanted to achieve through reforms. And it was, of course, a private market economy, capitalistic economy, with lots of competition and lots of macroeconomic stability. And then what was much more difficult, we tried to make a transition from a very, very dramatic circumstances to this intended goal. For me, based on my previous work on reforms in former socialist countries, one was clear: we have to be radical. Some people call it shock therapy. I don't use this emotional expression. But radical meaning that we start a comprehensive reform quickly. It took us 3 months to elaborate the plan while trying to put out various fires in the economy. So radical and moving on a broad front. So the package of reform consisted in macroeconomic stabilization to get rid of hyperinflation, massive liberalization, massive, so that people can cooperate through the markets, removing remnants of the central planning, so introducing convertibility of money, so that people can import freely for production purposes and for traveling. And we try to move at a great speed, not to delay change, not to be too gradual. We wanted to make a breakthrough. And I assumed, and I knew from my previous studies that if you move slowly, or step by step, there would be no hope for any recovery. If you undertake a radical approach, there is a chance. So a risky strategy when there is a chance is much better than hopeless strategy. And this was the guiding principle in trying to make the transition from a very dramatic economic situation to a much better model. Well, if you look at GDP growth between 2013 and 89 or even more, 91, then Poland's GDP has been doubled. And this is to be compared, say, with Ukraine. And the present GDP level is still lower than in 89 or 1990 or 91. And there's a lot of studies already. There are lots of studies which show that the more market reforms you accumulate, starting from a socialist or quasi-socialist economy, it's better for your economic growth. This is empirical, nothing ideological. And the second lesson is that it pays to avoid deep recessions, which means it pays to be careful with monetary policy so as not to allow the booms, credit booms, which have a nasty tendency to turn into the busts. So I think there are two reasons for Poland's relative economic success. First, accumulation of market reforms. And second, pretty conservative monetary policy, which has not allowed credit booms, radical credit booms to develop. But let me finish that we still have some reforms to be completed. First, to complete privatization, to depoliticize the economy. There are still too many state-dominated enterprises which perform like usually such enterprises perform below their potential. So we have to privatize. Second, we have to increase employment via abolishing such barriers to employment like an excessive minimum wage or certain disincentives to employ older people. We have to reform our public universities. which should not resemble the medieval universities in Europe, but should be much more based on an enterprise model like in the US. And I think we have to still to reform the justice system in Poland. Judges in Poland are politically independent and they are not corrupt, so this is not a problem, but they are too slow and they're incompetent, especially regarding economic problems. So we have to have a much better educated judges and much more efficient justice system. And the same goes for the prosecutors, by the way, and the police.